Hi, I'm Eddie Burke. I've been the bartender at the Hollywood Improv for 40 years, and this is my podcast, Eddie's Bar at the Improv. All right, hey guys, thanks for being here today. I appreciate it. The man that's joining me today is what I feel is probably...
I'm a man all of a sudden?
There you go, yeah.
Holy
is probably
shit.
the best kept secret in Hollywood. When anybody mentions the Improv, they just don't seem to mention this man. Yet at the same time, had it not been for him, the Improv might not even be here today. It definitely wouldn't be what it is. He's an actor, producer, writer, teacher. He's been in the business for God knows how many years.
Since I'm 13, I'm 75, so it's 62 years.
You're 75. Jeez.
All
You're
right, I
older
lie.
than me.
I'm 75. I'm 75.
Well, welcome, Mr. Lonow, Mark Lonow,
Thank you.
who
With that introduction, I'd like to meet me.
I would too. I'd like to meet the man that started it all here with me way back. In what year did you start here? 1979.
I got to ask you something. Was Loretta here when you got here?
No, Loretta came after. She came about 2 or 3 years.
So why didn't we make you head bartender?
Why didn't you? I thought I was. Was I
Well,
not?
she was most of the nights. She got most of the nights back then.
Well, because I gave her them. I was taking acting classes. When you were here, I was working Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And after she started, I was taking an acting class Monday and Wednesday. So I gave her Wednesday. So as a result, she was working Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Notice the depth with which I remember the Improv in 1979.
Right, and you'll find out that he remembers very little. I'm going to try and prod him along as we go. But it's something that we will get a lot of information out of. So let's just get right to it. What brought you to the Improv to begin with?
Okay. So
Why here?
Joanne and I and a guy named Jeffrey Lampert had an improv group that worked nightclubs. And we began at the Riviera Cafe in New York City on 7th Avenue and Christopher Street. And Chris Albrecht, who was at that time manager of the New York room, heard about us. We ran that room on at the Riviera for probably 2.5 years. And Chris heard about us, and he said, asked if we would like to come up and audition.
For the Improv.
For the Improv on 44th and 9th. So we did, and he said, anytime you want to come in, you can come up, which then relieved us of the necessity of getting an audience, so we moved up. And then we worked there, and we worked Catch, and we worked the Strip in New York.
Yeah, those were actually Catch a Rising Star and the Improv were, at that time, I think, were the two biggest clubs.
Right. The Strip opened later, but at that point, it was basically the Improv and Catch.
When did you come out to L.A.?
I came out to L.A. First in 1976, 75, 76, because we were friends with Madeline Kahn, and she was doing, my years may be off here, she was doing Young Frankenstein. And we were hanging out in New York, and she said, why don't you two come on out, and you'll have a vacation, we'll party, but okay, great. So I mentioned it to my agent, and he said, well, if you're going to go to L.A., I have an agency out in L.A. that's a partner, and maybe he'll want to send you up on jobs. I said, great, it'll pay for the vacation. So we came out. I stayed at my aunt's house, so we, saved money. I met Mike Rosen of Dade Rosen at that point. Mm-hmm. He sent me up for a sitcom entitled Spencer's Pilot. And I was so anxious because I had never done TV. I've done live stage since I'm 13 years old. It shocked the shit out of me that I got so nervous. Oh, it's television, my Lord. That in the audition, I had to reach for a pencil and answer the phone at the same time. And when I answered the phone, I shoved the pencil up my nose accidentally. I was so humiliated, and it was
just
it was a very long scene, and they well, thank you. And I went back to the house, and I was mortified, and I said, Joe, I'm getting out of the business. I can't believe that after all these years, I'm that frightened. This is crazy. What am I doing? I don't belong in this business. And as I'm doing that, the phone rings, and I got the job. The first audition, first day, I got the job.
And the rest is history.
And then I didn't stop working for the next 6 years.
You did, actually, in my mind, when I knew you, you did a 2-part episode of Moonlighting, which I had never really seen you act before Moonlighting, which I thought personally was such a stupendous job. It was a really, really good job.
Thank you.
You also were a star of the movie
Thank God It's Friday.
Thank God It's Friday with George Segal, and a lot of people...
No.
Wasn't George Segal?
George Segal, we was co-starred in The Last Married Couple in America
that's
by
the movie
John
I'm
Herman
thinking about.
Shaner.
Okay.
Right.
That's
Thank
the one.
God It's Friday starred Donna Summer and the Commodores. It was a... what was Neil Bogart's? It was a disco movie. We did it at the old Oscos on La Cienega and San Vicente.
I just want people to realize your the things that you have done, because you're such a well-kept secret. I mean, nobody realizes that when you first became partners. Well, let me ask you, what made you become partner here at the Improv, or what brought that about?
Very interesting and long story. So
we have time.
I did my first series. Here's an interesting story. I would fill in with waiter jobs in New York, and I worked a lot, but it was in stock. It was in regional theater. I did a couple of Broadway things. Equity Library Theater was kind of on Broadway. I worked at Joe Papp's Public Theater down on Astor Place. But I didn't work all the time, so I was a waiter. And I was definitely a waiter when I came back from stock, and I was still in high school, at a place called Pips in Sheepshead Bay.
Sure, I remember that.
And Pips was the starting ground for Rodney Dangerfield. It was a hangout for Lenny Bruce, because the owner, George Schultz, was their best friends.
Okay.
And a woman named Joan Rivers. Okay, so Joan and Edgar would come in every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday for 6, maybe 8 months. And they worked on the act. She had an act, but she was changing the act. She was changing her point of view a little bit. And so every night, and I watched them, and I watched them, and I watched them. Now, speed forward again to those auditions I did, Spencer's Pilot, and so my agent says to me, they're doing a sitcom with a whole bunch of, couples. You want to go up for it? I said, yeah. Who wrote it? And he says, Joan Rivers. I said, Joan Rivers? Really? Yeah, I'll go up for it. I know Joan, blah, 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 blah. So I go, and like every other actor, I'm sitting in the lobby waiting to go in. Well, not in the lobby, in the foyer of wherever the audition was.
It's called the waiting room, but okay.
Thanks. That's one of the problems I have with lines.
It's called senior moments, but go on.
Don't go there. Fuck you. Anyway, so Joan walks in and passes me by, and I just look up. She stops, and she turns around, and she goes, Mark? And I go, oh, yeah, hi, Joan. What are you doing here? Well, I'm auditioning for your show. You're an actor? And she did it probably more emphatically than that. You're an actor? I said, yeah. Are you good? And I said, well, I think so. Okay. And she leaves. She goes in. All right. People get called in, and I get called in. And there she is. It's her and Hal Dresner, and I don't even remember the director, but a whole bunch of people are sitting in the room. And she says, so, what did you prepare? I I said, I didn't prepare anything. You gave me the sides. She said, funny, funny. Okay, let's start. So I read the scene. Silence, dead silence. Would you do the second scene, please? Okay, I do the second scene. Silence, dead silence. They're all looking at each other. And I'm going, that's the end of that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And then she says, thank you very much, she says to me. And I've been to enough auditions to know that thank you very much is not a good sign. I said goodbye, and I walk out. I walk down the hall, and before I get to the door, she opens the office door, sticks her head out, and says, Mark, you got the show, and closes the door. And so I had a series, and we did the series. Now, that series was about 4 couples at that time. It wasn't husbands, wives, and lovers. There was another couple. It was 4, or maybe there were 5 couples. And David Jacobs, the producer of Knots Landing, saw the show and said, oh, it'll work much better as a nighttime soap opera. And he had done Dallas, and they wanted him to do anything. And he had thought of this years before. So he puts on Knots Landing, and my stepdaughter, Claudia, gets Michelle Lee's daughter. That's a whole other story. And it becomes a huge hit, and ethnic characters begin going bye-bye. And so I did All in the Family. I did every ethnic show you could think of. And I didn't stop working from 1976 until 1978, when literally overnight, bye-bye career. I had no work basically at all. I mean, I worked occasionally, but
Just
there was
a little drought.
Yeah, a little drought. And it was, and my partner here, eventually my partner, was getting a divorce, and he gave the New York club to his ex-wife.
Right.
And the New York club was allowing this club to survive. And he needed somebody. But Chris Albrecht couldn't get along with my partner's ex-wife.
In New York.
He left, I think, 6 weeks after she got there. Again, my time span may be wrong. He walks out, and he calls me. And he said, hey, Mark, I know you're having trouble getting work. How about we buy out Bud? And I go, what? What? He said, you, me, and this guy, Steve Ziplo. Steve Ziplo has a lot of money, and we can do it. And I really like Chris. I mean, we were very close and blah, blah, blah. And so, okay, I'll do that. And we began to negotiate. This is in 78, probably early 78. I mean, again, my timing may be screwed.
Had you and Joanne or your improv group ever played here before that? At the Improv? This Improv?
No, because I came out to do Thank God It's Friday and Husbands, Wives, and Lovers, and started working as an actor, single, and the threesome Off the Wall fell apart. And Joanne became a stand-up on her own, and she started working New York. I mean, she did The Tonight Show with Carson, and so she went her way. Jeffrey Lampert became a producer at Village Roadshow. Mm-hmm. So he went his way. Joanne went to stand-up, and I started acting.
Had you known your ex-partner beforehand? Did you know him in New York?
Not really. He saw us audition. The pause was for me to take a sip of coffee. He saw us audition, and I did an animal transformation thing to warm up the audience. And I jumped on the back of some chairs, and I swung from the light bars, and he walked out
Not a good
of
sign.
the room on our audition. However, we tore the house up, and he couldn't say no. So but that was it. That was the first time I had ever met him. I believe that was the first time I had ever met him.
And so then you and Chris and Steve.
And Steve Ziplo began this negotiation, which went on forever.
I'm sure.
And in September of 1979, sitting at this very bar, Bud sidles up to me and says, I don't really want Chris as my partner. You know, I've been his partner in New York. I want you as my partner. And I said, I got to talk to Chris, blah, blah, blah. And we made the deal.
And the rest is,
And the rest is
history, good, bad, or indifferent.
That is correct.
When you took over, and I know you and I differ or disagree on who was here first, but when you took over, this place was, I thought, about to die.
You thought it was about to die? It was about to die.
It was about to die.
Even a question.
It's like you came in and you made this a business. There were, I'd say, 50% of the clientele back then eating and drinking for nothing because they were investors, so to speak, with Bud. And you turned that all around. You made it a business. You made it a very profitable business. You added little touches like a famous popcorn machine that was over here.
I burnt myself on that popcorn machine more than Loretta burnt herself. I was always reaching my hand in to get the popcorn, and I would forget.
I told you
Fuck, oh man, what?
Keep your hand out of the cookie jar.
That's right.
You also were very responsible in what was probably the best jukebox in L.A., which we had in the corner there, which I think I've mentioned before. I think Bruce Willis and John Goodman were the very beginnings of karaoke.
Yes, well, that was the karaoke machine. And also Barry Minifield.
Barry Minifield.
Not Rabinowitz, because he was the...
he did the karaoke.
And he did America's Got Talent, you know,
right.
Recently.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, he just wanted to be a singer, and he was the chef. So he would karaoke. Anyway, let me finish that the story about... Was I boring you?
My eyes weren't closed all the way, but go ahead.
But they were getting there.
Go ahead.
So anyway... Husbands, Wives, and Lovers closed, and my daughter went on to be a big star and ran in the show for 11 years. 11 years? Yeah, 10 years, something like that.
Yeah, and she's still doing pretty well. She's a very big-time writer now.
Big-time writer, big time. She didn't
That's
really
Claudia
like to
Lonow.
perform. Yes.
And you also have a stepson who's very successful.
Michael Rappaport.
Yes.
We were the home of all waifs.
Well, Michael, it's funny. I'll tell you a story about Michael that where he used your name. He was, you know how Michael was at the age of 16. It was like, yo, the Knicks are on and all this stuff. And he's out there one day and there's in the restaurant area and there's like, you know, people having dinner. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's watching the ball game on the TV and he just blurts out, fucking Knicks! I go like, oh my God. I go over to him and I go like, Michael, there are people here. They're eating. You know, keep it down. He goes, oh, okay. 10 minutes later, he comes over to me and he goes, Eddie, I really want to thank you for coming over and telling me to be quiet. Everybody else would go to Mark, and Mark would yell at me.
Well, when he moved into the house...
That's
I
all
made
you
him
did.
sign a contract. Yeah, a lot of it. But I made him sign a contract that he had to maintain a B average, and he had to go to all his classes, and and then he started asking me to go up on the stage as a comic.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
But he's now quite a good comic.
And quite a good actor.
But he was always a good actor, and he went up on stage. He was horrible. Literally, and he'll admit it. But the casting director from China Beach was in the audience, and his son, I think it was his son, fell in love and said to her son, I think it might have been a woman, that guy's got something. And she called him in for an audition on China Beach, and he got it.
And he got the role.
And he
rolled from there, really.
And from there, and then he did Zebrahead, and then... He's done like 60, 65
I know
movies.
he's got a show on Netflix now, I believe.
Yeah.
Too, and we'll have him on at some point. So when you took over, when you came in, you were basically the managing partner of what was going on
Yeah,
here.
and my partner introduced me as his manager. I gave him the money to stay open, and his friend came in and he said, I'd like you to meet my manager. I'm like, well, excuse me, I'm not your manager.
Well, what kind of changes did you see immediately that you had to do? And
Oh man!
that because
Well, first of all, the physical plant was just a wreck. It was dirty. It was dark. So we broke open in these windows. I put in these windows. I put the skylights in. We took out the ceiling. We also we raised the
Restaurant area.
platform, so the restaurant was separate from the bar. We cleaned up the bathrooms a little bit, not like they are now, but we cleaned up the bathrooms. And there isn't anything in this building that remained the same after the first year and a half or whatever that I was here. Nothing.
And nothing ever stopped breaking or whatever, because I remember after a year you said to me, like, Eddie, every time I think everything is done, 10 other things happen.
It's never done because nothing was repaired, nothing was kept up to speed. It was really a disaster. Robert Klein he said the line he had about this club, he said, this is the only club I know that when you go to the bathroom, you have to wipe your hands before you grab the doorknob.
I remember that bathroom. It had a floor-to-ceiling door when I first started, and one day Bud walks in there, and there's 3 guys in there snorting coke or something. The next day...
Never.
No. The next day, he had that door cut down so that anybody in there had to be seen if they were doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a little dangerous.
That was a different day. There was a lot going on here that just didn't go on anywhere else, and probably never would.
That's correct.
The times that you came, or after you took over, and you ran into plenty of obstacles, I'm sure, in terms of comics and what have you, but you were also very involved in the comedian strike.
Yeah, that was before. I had not even thought about owning a nightclub when the comedian strike happened. Joanne, though, was a comic.
Right.
So, and I was a performer. I was an actor, and I was doing all those shows. So I would hang out with the guys and the girls, and we'd go to Cantor's at 3 in the morning, and we'd have breakfast, and Joe would come off the road, or she'd do some sets, and so I knew everybody. And one New Year's Eve, I think it was, and Marty Cohn, it might not have been Marty Cohn, but anyway, a comic. We're sitting there. It's about 3 in the morning. And he comes over and Dreesen is sitting at the table with us, and he goes, "Hey Tom, you got $5? I want to get some breakfast." He said, "Didn't you work tonight?" And he said, "Yeah, I worked." "You can't afford breakfast?" He said, "Well, I don't. Yeah, no, I haven't been working. I've been just doing the store." Oh, really? And that was when the idea was implanted in Dreesen's head to ask for money from Mitzi, because Mitzi then owned the Sands. Was it? She had the main room, she had the original room, she had the belly room, and she had the Sands in Vegas. The Improv wasn't even in that game.
Right.
I mean, it was so long before I got here, and they went up and they asked her to give them I think it was $15 a set, and she said no. And I come from union organizers. My family were union organizers. And,
Look out.
And Joanne said, "Can you help us?" And I said, "Yeah." And I organized a picket line that ran 24 hours a day for 7 weeks in front of the Comedy Store. And then we called the Teamsters, and we weren't a legitimate union, so the Teamsters couldn't officially back us, but none of the drivers would cross the line.
And there was no, the Improv was here, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
But why not the Improv?
Because they knew they would put Bud out of business.
Okay. That's,
I mentioned his name.
That's kind of like what I picked up, was that the Improv wasn't dealt with the same way because it
There was
wasn't
no
doing
way.
as well.
There was
Yeah.
no way he could have survived the strike. Absolutely not.
No, that's
No.
well, that's why you are so responsible in my mind for when you came in making this club grow.
We organized a bus train of cars. We had a couple of cars, 2-3 cars in front of the store, and we, as people would try to come into the store, we would talk to them about not going into the store, and of course the question would come up, well, I want to go see comedy. You want to go see comedy? We'll drive you down to the Improv, and we'd put them in the
what a
car and we
great
drove
idea.
them here.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't. That didn't win the day. I mean, there was a national meeting of AFTRA. It wasn't AFTRA SAG. It was of
AFTRA.
AFTRA, and I said, let's go and talk to the members, and we went. And she sent a representative, and we sent a representative. I was one of them. Was me and Dreesen. Letterman didn't go. He stayed on the line. I don't remember who. Joanne went, and I don't know, a couple other people. And they sent Biff Maynard and Ali Joe Prater
and Argus Hamilton. Mm-hmm.
And Biff Maynard was the first to speak, and he gets up in front of 250 union organizers, and the first thing out of his mouth is he says, "Comics are not workers." And you could hear the ceiling fall in. It was dead silence. It was nuts. And I turned to Dries and I said, we just won.
And how long after that did the fire occur here?
No, the fire happened before.
Oh, it happened before.
Yes. Well, let me just
Okay.
finish that. So then Dreesen gets up and speaks, and who is the comic who passed away? His mother was the bookkeeper, George Miller.
Oh, okay.
George Miller
Mhm.
spoke, and so we got in the cars and we drove to the picket line, and Jay is standing there, and I get out to go over and explain what happened to Jay, and Tom and Joanne go over to Letterman, and they're standing there, and Jay and I are standing in the driveway, and Biff Maynard pulls up in the car, and he stops behind. My back is to Maynard. Jay is looking at him, and he goes, "Biff is here." I said, "Okay." And Biff guns the car, boom, boom, and he drives at us.
Oh, my
Now,
God.
I don't think he wanted to hit us, but Jay pushes me aside and hits the floor, and you hear bang. And we all think Jay just got hit by Biff Maynard, including Biff Maynard. And he pulls in the back. Now, there is a law from 1934 or 36 that if you injure a picketer in the process of walking a picket line, the picketer can sue you for your business. That's how they stopped the killings of picketers, because in the 30s they'd kill picketers.
Right.
Biff Maynard runs upstairs. I lean over. Everybody runs over. You know, Jay's on the floor, and he's fucking winking. And I go, "What are you doing?" He says, "I slapped the car. It's an old trick." Oh, no, Jesus, Jay. And while we're just talking, nothing happened, obviously.
Right.
An emissary came down from Mitzi and asked Tom to go upstairs, and a half hour, 45 minutes later, it was all over. We had won.
Oh,
And
great.
that's how we won the strike.
That's interesting too, because little known story. I think I might have told this once before. I don't know if you know it. Biff Maynard, Argus Hamilton, and Ali Joe Prater all lived in the building that I lived in up on Laurel Avenue.
Yeah, sure.
And I was not working here yet. They took me over to the Comedy Store to get a bartending job and meet Mitzi, which I did. And went over there and takes me into the kitchen. She takes me into the kitchen and shows me their bar. And I didn't know what to say. I said, "Okay, very nice, but thank you. I would like to work with people."
Yeah, it's a service bar. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's all it was.
And
And
it
those three guys were probably very responsible for the fire that went on
Well,
here.
Biff Maynard confessed to me.
Well, on his deathbed, he confessed that Ollie Joe Prater did it.
Okay. He said to me, well, maybe he said we did it. I remember him saying I did it.
Okay.
But what he did was they wanted to scare Bud, and they set the garbage, the dumpster on fire, and the fire got so big it caught the roof, and it burnt the roof out.
Yeah.
And that was the end of it.
And that was when we had our lovely showroom here in the restaurant for
Tom Arnold, not Tom Arnold, Tom Archibald. Tom Archibald
okay. Dottie's.
closed off the dining room, but I'm not a partner at this point. But
right.
and we did the stage was where those pictures are now.
When you look back and you see what's happened to the club, are you proud? Are you?
Oh yeah, without question. But
Yeah,
I'm proud and I'm disappointed
Mm-hmm.
because it should have been much bigger.
right. But the things that have happened, forgetting like maybe the last couple of years, the things that have happened over the years have really made the Improv name a brand to be admired, a brand to be like, to get on this stage was like the biggest honor in the world.
It was always that way.
Yeah.
It was always, even in New York, because in New York, there was no competition.
Right.
It was the only room. It was long before Catch. It was long before the Strip. It was long before any of them. The Cellar. There might have been one or two very, very little small clubs which did some jazz and had spots, for comics. But what happened was they were all, because Silver, my partner's wife, was a Broadway dancer, and she brought all her friends into the Improv. It served no dinners. You could have like Smiler's coffee cake and coffee. It was a coffee shop, but you heard Judy Garland. I mean,
Right.
literally. You heard. I think Dustin Hoffman played the piano. You heard incredible stars for nothing, for a cup of coffee and a piece of cake.
Yeah.
And that was it. But the first night a comic got on, there were two comics they went up to him, because basically it was Broadway singers, and could I go up and but me go, yeah, sure. The next day, there were 50 comics online outside the door.
Oh,
When
God.
Bud showed up.
Do you remember who they were, the comics back then? The first couple?
No, you'd have to ask my partner. He
Yeah.
would remember who it was. I mean, it's long before me.
So-
And then it became, then it was comic. No, it was singer, comic, singer, comic. Then it was singer, comic. Then it was singer, comic. Then it was comic, singer. Then it was comic, singer. Then it was comic,
When it-
singer.
when it opened out here, if I remember correctly, he had quite a variety of not just comedians, but he had music nights.
Yes.
And he had
But he couldn't make it. He didn't.
Right.
He didn't know how to run a business, and he
Yeah.
couldn't make it. And Marcel Montecito was the piano player.
Sure.
I don't remember. I don't even remember who the doorman was. Oh, was it?
Not
that-
Jack Raymond or
No. Anyway,
well, back then, yeah.
but in New York, I mean, it was Dustin Hoffman and Al Pacino painted the walls.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and they were just helping to build a stage and a place to get up and do something.
Well, since you said build a stage, there were from what I've discovered, some very famous people that literally helped build this place. The bar, Jay Leno, I believe, helped paint or whatever out here.
Jay used to drive from Boston on his bike to do open mic, and for 3 or 4 weeks he drove down and didn't get on. And about the 4th week, he went up to Bud and he said, Mr. Friedman, do you mind if I get up on the stage? I come from Boston looked at him. He said, "You come from Boston? Yeah, go up." And he did very well. And, he used to park his bike at Dyke's Lumber, not a joke, that's the name, it's still there, which is next door, and come in. And then he got up on stage. There was a point at which every comic, pretty much every named comic who worked in the United States started on the Improv stage in New York.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah.
Because they're out here too. I mean, maybe not as, definitely not as raw and not as, let's say beginning as New York. But there's so many comics out here that have started here that they're first employees that you guys hired.
Which I,
you
without
know,
question.
that
Kevin
were,
Nealon.
Yep. Kevin Nealon, Eileen Kahn, who is
Eileen
now
Kahn.
an executive producer on Disney shows or what have you, and there Callie Couric, I think is her name.
Yeah, she used to date Callie Couric, who did Nashville. She did Nashville, and she did, what was the other show?
Thelma, but she also
dated Richard Lewis.
Yeah, but she
How
wrote
that ever-
Thelma and Louise.
She wrote Thelma and
Yes.
Louise.
Mhm.
Yeah.
These are all people
You know
that
who
worked
hosts?
here.
Okay. Thank God it's Friday. Come on.
Well, she
The waitress was here. I can't remember her name. She became a college professor.
a college professor.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll
that
think
part
of it.
I don't remember, or that person I don't remember. But there were like even door guys that we had. One of the Baldwins.
Oh, that's right.
Which is
You
funny.
know who bartended? Leslie Moonves
Yes,
was the
Mhm.
bartender here
Right.
in 1977.
Mhm.
The president of CBS, who just is no longer
Is
the
no
president,
longer
but
president
he
of
was the
CBS.
bartender here. Absolutely.
But him and the Baldwin, I think it was Danny Baldwin. I'm not sure. That was a door guy who, all he did was come over to me and, Eddie, can you give me a drink? I said, Danny, you're working. I can't give you a drink. I just need a drink. I'll be fine. No, I can't give you a drink. Just go back to the door. And it's like, I think he had a little problem, which he solved and became a very working actor. Him and, well, you mentioned Kevin. We mentioned Eileen. There's
Karen Black,
Yeah.
Bette Midler,
Well, those were New York,
New
right?
Yorker people.
Yeah.
That was New
Mhm.
York, yeah.
Yeah, Danny Aiello.
Danny
Again, New
Aiello.
York. And I think his son worked the door here
yeah.
too.
And I did City Hall with Danny and Al Pacino. Just another movie I did.
Yeah, just throwing that out there. Just, but you know, it's you should actually watch some of the things that this man has done because he's a really fine actor. And like I said before, that
There's a camera here.
He's
Notice how observant I am.
He's a best kept secret out here. And again, I just have to say this because I know personally.
Deborah Winger.
Okay. Right in the middle
Because
of my
when she
little
walked on
thing.
the set and I'm
I'm
sitting
talking
there.
now. It's my turn.
Okay.
It's but it's but people just don't realize that that Mr. Mark Lonow is so responsible for the surge that the Improv went through before and during and evening at the Improv and when he took over, because it really might have been, or definitely might have been done way back in 78, 79 and back then.
I think without question.
Yeah,
I mean, he was so close to selling out to us.
really.
Oh, yeah.
To just
No, we were really negotiating the deal, and then he realized, well, maybe Mark could become my partner. And that
rather
was,
than
leave it completely.
yeah, and poor Chris just went on to
be
president of what, HBO or
He's
something
now
like
president of Stars, I think. He's still
Yes,
president of Stars?
I think it's
Yeah.
Stars. Yeah, so it's so many everybody that seems to touch this place seems to go on except the bartender who's
Well, you
sitting
never
here.
know what's happening. Come on.
That's right.
You don't know
he
where it's
still
going.
acts
Or
occasionally.
the photographer, right.
That's right. There's just many of us. Your wife Joanne is a very established comic, and you guys have also had kind of like side ventures. You're producing a play in New York.
We're co-producing The Prom, which we got 7 Tony nominations for.
Wow.
We've done Peter and the Starcatcher. Yeah, we've done about a half a dozen New York shows that we co-produced, invested in, whatever.
And you've written a few that you've performed out here.
And yeah, we did Jews, Christians, and Screwing Stalin. We did that at the Matrix, which, by the way, may wind up going to New York.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, good luck.
We're going to be working on it over this winter, and we think we have a lead producer who will.
Oh, that's great.
And we'll take it on the road first, work out some kinks, and then bring it into New York.
And you've also managed some very big comics
We
over
managed
the years.
Louis Black, Kathleen Manigan. Yeah, we've done okay.
A man of many dimensions. And we'll also have his wife on at some point, Joanne Astro.
If you don't,
Yeah, I know.
I'm
Believe
fucking
me, Joanne,
dead.
you'll be here. You're dead. I'm dead. Well, I want to thank you very much, Mark.
oh, that's
I really
it. That was
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I knew there was a camera here, I would have spoken to it. I don't have to talk to you, Eddie.
Well, nobody does. Everybody prefers to go into the cameras to me. It's
But
like
I
I'm
di-
invisible.
I didn't do that much. I was actually talking to you like you're a person, which is a big step up for you.
You're the first person that's given me that compliment.
There you go.
Yeah, otherwise it's sort of like, drink, yo, bartender.
Yo, isn't
Yeah.
that your name? That's your first name.
That's my first name.
Yo, Burke.
Sometimes it's yo, asshole. It's like, whatever. I answer to anything. Just leave money on the bar.
That's
it.
I hear you.
Oh, once again, thanks a lot. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have a question before we wrap up. You can do it on mic though. The off-the-wall comedy. I photographed an off-the-wall.
Different off the wall.
Okay.
We were.
This was people in their 50s and 60s at the time when I photographed them. I thought it might have been some of the remnants of the old.
Oh, you're
No.
thinking of Tom Tully and
well, I didn't get
Archie Hahn.
I didn't get into it because the MC didn't really, the host did. But our original, we were a group of 7 when we started, including Henry Winkler, who actually, when he did Lords of Flatbush, took a character from that group that I developed and wound up leaving the group. But as the people left, we were too lazy to replace anybody until we whittled it down to 3, and then Jeffrey was the 3rd. And we worked clubs all over the East Coast. So we worked Grandma Minnie's, we worked in Philadelphia, Washington. And so we were an improv group, but working in comedy rooms and nightclubs. And we did real improv. At the bottom line, I mean, we opened for Maynard Ferguson, we opened for Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. I mean, we worked, but in nightclubs. It was like no one had ever done that. It wasn't in a Second City so it was off the wall. It was East Coast. It had nothing to do with the kids here, off the wall. And we became friends with the kids here, but they were using the name. We weren't going to say anything,
Yeah, just because all those guys, when I started, they were performing here. I think it was
Absolutely.
every Sunday or Monday night.
Absolutely.
Tom Tully, Archie Hahn, I think it's
Correct.
Dave Ruprecht, Betty Thomas.
Betty Thomas,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they were like, I don't know, almost all the time. George Wendt was with them
That's
occasionally.
right.
So
well,
that-
George Wendt was married to Jane?
No,
Not Jane.
it was something with a B, and I can't think of her name. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. Don't put this out there.
But also, but there was so much more work other than the clubs, because when I came out, I did...
Bernadette. Was it Bernadette?
Yes, Bernadette. And when I did table settings at the Matrix as an actor, as the husband, Donna McKechnie was my wife, and we ran for 14 months.
Wow.
In a live show at the Matrix, 1970. Oh, I think I was already a partner here, so that might have been 80, 81.
That's what I told you. You didn't start here till 88.
No. You're starting to get annoying.
Of all the years you were here, and how many years were you here?
38.
38 years.
Yeah.
Are there moments or a moment that sticks out to you, be it
Yes.
an incident, a person, whatever?
Well, there are more than one. In the seat I am now sitting in, there was a man named Johnny Carson who
Yes.
came in
Mhm.
every, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, and he would drink until we closed this bar, for months.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for whatever reason, he disappeared. And then I met Ben Stiller, Annie.
Mira and
Oh,
Mira.
right, of course. Ann Mira, his mother, came in to introduce him to me and to whoever else was in the bar. So that was a moment when I went, oh. And then, here's an interesting thing. He did his first sitcom that he created, and he used my house as the location. So they shot I don't even remember what the name of the sitcom
Ben
was.
Stiller show.
Was that it?
John Apatow produced it.
There you go. Okay. So, and they did it in my house when we were on Ledgewood, lived on Ledgewood.
Is there anybody that you personally are in awe of seeing besides maybe Johnny? I know for me it was him, and it was also just recently Paul McCartney who was
Oh.
here. It was, I mean, and
Yeah.
back then though, the comics that performed here were were real names. You know, you got to see all of them.
Carlin, although Carlin didn't actually perform that much here on this stage, but he came in for dinner every once in a while and hung out, and I was really impressed by that. And then, I became friends with Kelly, his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That was someone who went, oh, that's this Carlin.
Yeah.
Hey, that's Carlin. Not really.
You get jaded, is what you say.
Yeah. I kissed Natalie Wood in the last married couple in America. Once you do that, you don't really.
Yeah, as long as you
feel-
don't kiss Robert Wagner. The one person, since we brought that subject up, that I remember, I don't even know if you know, he came in here once, was Bob Dylan. He came in one afternoon.
no.
It was about, we had just opened up with, he came in with, happened to be a friend of mine, and just sat down over in the restaurant and had a drink and whatever. And it was for me, I grew
Absolutely,
up
sure.
with Bob Dylan. It was really an enlightening moment.
When Joanne and I lived on McDougal Street, Bob Dylan lived on that they were called McDougal Courts.
Mhm.
There was a row of houses on McDougal and a row of houses on Sullivan that shared the backyard. And every morning I would walk out, and there was Dylan going to a recording session with a little stocking cap, so no one would know who he is. Everybody knew who he was, but
Right.
but
Yeah, different
there-
time. New
different-
York
it was-
is, you also can be a little bit more anonymous.
Oh
in
yeah,
New
and no
York.
one bothered him,
No,
But there he was every morning.
Hey, it's Robert Zimmerman.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not Bob Dylan. That's Robert Zimmerman. But we've had so many people here over the years that that even Barbara Streisand, Schwarzenegger.
Oh, absolutely.
That
sure.
if they don't come in to eat or drink, they've come in for a show to see
Well,
somebody.
My niece brought in John Kennedy Jr. into the Santa Monica Club in a political rally. That was I got impressed by that, but that wasn't in this room. That was in Santa Monica.
Right. A little bit different.
Yeah, a little different.
So and those there, I remember were there any incidents that you possibly remember? I'll remind you of one in particular. I think it was a Christmas Eve or pretty close to it. There was nobody here but me, you, and 2 or 3 other people, and 2 guys walk in here. The other guy that was here was the brother of that chef that killed.
Bobby Blake? No,
No, they killed the actress. God, I can't think of his name. He was a chef at Ma Maison, and he had murdered his girlfriend. But anyway, his brother was, just a nice little note. His brother was here, and you guys were sitting and talking. 2 guys walk in and order a drink. Nothing's being said to anybody, nowhere. This guy just turns to the other guy and he goes like, I don't like you. And I wish I could think of his name anyway. He guy just goes, okay. And he goes, no, I don't like you. And just out of the blue, the guy just jumped on him, started punching him,
Oh,
and then you.
yeah. I
And he
remember
bit
that.
both of you guys.
That's right.
You had to go get tetanus shots.
Yes, my lord.
Yeah,
How
that-
did I not remember that?
That was like that. Fortunately, we did not have that type
Nah.
of thing too often. So that's that kind of sticks out. And we won't talk about like Bruce Willis jumping over a table to.
Oh no! Well,
to-
Bruce was terrified of going up on the stage, and that's after I had done moonlighting. And he said, "Mark, he was doing a fundraiser, and he said, you got to stand with me and help me get through this." And I stood on the side of the stage, and he'd come off, and he'd say, "What else should I say?" And then boom, and then he'd go back. And I stood there for about an hour until he got over the nerves. But he was
Yeah.
terrified of doing stand-up or just talking to a single, as
Yeah,
a
well,
single.
Bruce and I kind of had like a strained type of relationship. He was like.
Bruce has that with a lot of people.
Yeah, he and again, I think I've told this story where he once confronted me like, would you said something to the Inquirer about me, and number one, I didn't read the Inquirer. Number two, I had no idea what he was talking about, so I couldn't respond. And he starts yelling at me like, you just did this, did that, and anyway, the night comes to an end, and I think I mentioned it to you, and you said you had no idea of what he was going on about. And the next day I went and bought the Inquirer to see what in the world he was talking about. And it was simply, there was one little line in there that said, the bartender at the Improv says Bruce Willis comes in every night, sits at the end of the bar, and plays his harmonica. That was it. Not a. Either way, there's nothing
No,
to
there's
say
nothing
about
wrong
that.
with that.
And he's yelling at me about this. So the next night he comes in and he says, Eddie, give me a beer. I said, Bruce, I'm not giving you anything. He's, well, why? He didn't even remember. I said, Bruce,
Oh,
you yelled at me last night for that thing in the Inquirer. And he goes, yeah, well, it said the bartender, and I was the only male bartender at that time. So he took it to mean the bartender as opposed to just a general bartender when it was somebody else, but it also wasn't anything nasty.
Yeah,
It was-
yeah, but I know a lot of people say a lot of bad things about him, and I could do that too. However, we were relatively close friends for quite a while, and he's the man who taught me how to ski.
Is he really?
Absolutely. Him and Bruce DiMattia.
That's right. Wow.
We get into a car. We were going to go away for the weekend, and I go, where we going? He goes, we're going to go to Big Bear. Big Bear? I'm like 34 years old, 33 years old. Big Bear? I don't ski, guys. Yeah, right, okay. And they schlepped me up to Big Bear. They didn't buy, we rented skis. They take me to the bunny slope. This is how you
That's how
turn.
you start.
This is how. Then they drag me up, and about an hour later, they said, "We'll be back in 20 minutes. You practice. This is how you turn. This is how you stop. This is how you snowplow." They dragged me to the top of the mountain, and one stood behind me, and one went down like 30 yards or whatever, and they would yell, "Lean left, turn right. Lean right, turn left." And by the time I got to the bottom of the hill, like this is now 2-3 hours later, I skied. And then from then I skied, and we would go skiing all the time.
Is Jean-Claude Killy.
And became Jean-Claude Killy, and then I
Right.
blew my knee out.
Well, once again, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it.
This was actually fun, Eddie. I
Good.
didn't think you would be that interesting.
I
But
did-
anyway,
I have my moments, It's like Mike Carano, thank you.
Thank you.
As
Thanks,
usual.
Mike.
And Lindsay, thank you.